In this lesson, we'll bring our attention to setting up the flashlight. Now, there are various options you have of setting up things like our flashlight and keys. You can add dynamics if you like, but what we're going to do is focus on something more rigging specific. We'll make a control for it and allow it to follow the belt if we like, or follow the world. We're also going to want to make sure that we have a clip set up on there, or our open close clip attribute, so we can get that looking right. Okay, as he pulls the flashlight off, if you were ever to work on an animation like that. And we're going to explore how we can move the pivot of this object, of our control object. So basically what that will allow us to do is, let's say if we wanted the object to pivot from the top rather than from the center, we'll be able to set that up. Or if we wanted it to pivot from the end rather than center or at the clip end of the flashlight, we're going to be able to set that up. So that's going to be really cool. And then we'll also want to make sure that our character's hand is going to be able to be driven by this object if he were to ever pick up this flashlight. So those are some things that we want to keep in mind. So let's get right to it. We'll go ahead and create a circle for our control. With it now created, we'll select our flashlight body, show its local rotation axis, and snap the circle right to it. Okay, from here we'll scale it down, freeze its transformations, clean up its history. We can select the body again, just hide the local rotation axis. Select our curve, give it a name. We can call this CC underscore, abbreviate flashlight somewhat, so that's as follows. Okay, you don't have to, but just like using the shortest names as possible, just so that if we were to ever write a script or an expression, we wouldn't have to write too much, but yet still have a detailed enough name to know exactly what the control does. So with the control now named, we could even give it a color. We're going to the attribute editor, and we can use yellow again since it's a really standout color. We haven't been using yellow too much for this part of the body. Great. So we have our control curve here. We know that it's not going to scale, so we can get rid of its scale and visibility as well. Alright, now that that's done, we need to focus more on our outliner, so let's go there. Okay, now before we parent this curve, or this control curve that is, anywhere, let's go ahead and select the flashlight, go to its main body. As you can see, its pivot is nicely aligned right where the clip is, so that's going to be very helpful for us. But once we get to its main group, we'll frame it up and find it. So there it is. Great, let's even open that up to get to the other assets for our flashlight. So what we're going to want is for this, just to do a simple parent with the pieces of this flashlight to this actual object. Okay, so it's going to be as simple as that. And we're also going to want this group so we can attach it either to the belt or also to the world. So knowing those things, we can take the curve, parent it under the flashlight watchman group. Okay, and if you need to, you can switch the name of this group if you like. We're also going to move it so that it's going to be underneath our control objects, so everything will scale right. So once our flashlight control is underneath there, we can select the objects that make up the flashlight. Okay, it should have a name of flashlight in it, so it should be easy. They should be easy to select. So we select them all. Control click the flashlight control, just hit P. Great, so now that that's connected and we have our flashlight group, we can go ahead and with it selected, make sure that it's under the right node. So we'll close out our character geo node, open up our scale, and control click our control objects, hit P. Great, so now everything is going to scale the way we need it to for our flashlight, as we can see. Alright, so how are we going to get this flashlight connected to our belt and to the world? Well, we can again utilize our Rivet script for this. So if we would like to do that, since the clip is at a somewhat of a lower level, we can bring it up, can go to its smooth face and bring it up to a value of 2. That should look nicer. Alright, great. Now that we have this, we're going to want to select the clip and just go ahead and make sure we can assign a rivet to it. So we'll go to its its edges. Find some edges that will be aligned with our curve. Okay, we have several we can choose from here. So we'll just find one that's almost directly underneath. Even frame them up and see which ones we're selecting. Alright, so I think the middle one and the one adjacent to it would be fine. So once we've selected the two edges, we're ready to assign the rivet. We're ready to shrink the rivet, 0.05. Give it a name. That's RV underscore the abbreviated flashlight name, 01. Okay, we know that this is going to go underneath our extras and rivet group, so that will move the way we'd like it to. We also know that that is going to need to scale, so we can set that up. We just go to scale, select our rivet, and do our constraint. Great. Now that that's done, in order to get our flashlight control following the way we need it to, let's go back to our group for the flashlight underneath control objects. There it is. With that selected and located, we're ready to assign our constraints. So that's going to be first selecting the rivet, so we can apply that to the belt, followed by the world, so we can have that in as our next selection. And then we go right to our Watchman flashlight group. With all of these selected, we go to constraint and do a parent constraint. Alright, so now that these have been set up, if we like to, we can turn off the world, go to our hips, move those around. Okay, the flashlight's going to follow. Alright, great. Or if we like, going back to our Watchman flashlight group node, can zero out our rivet, go to the world, and as we move the hips again, notice it's going to not move. Wonderful. So now that that's set up, of course we can set up switches. So we'll just reverse the numbers we have here, since we have our belt coming up first, and then we can work on our driver attribute. So with our control object selected, let's go to modify and go down to add attribute. We call it driver, just as we've done before. Make it a displayable, hit add. Next, we call it follow. We call our actual attribute follow using enum. And remember, this is going to be the belt and the world. So two objects here that will be able to drive this. Once that's been set up, we hit OK. There's our attribute. Let's go to our set driven key window. Once there, we load that up as the driver. The driven, of course, is going to be our group node. So let's go to its parent constraint, load that up, select our both weights, and since our belt is highlighted first in our attribute, we can go ahead and just select those and hit key. Then switch it to world, go to our parent, zero that out, and put in a value of 1, key selected. Now we can test this out. World should be selected right now, so if we now move our belt, okay, it's not moving. If we go back and we select the belt, it should move along as we need it to. Alright, great. This is coming along quite well. Alright, so now that that's been set up, our next task, okay, we can go ahead and test out our scale to make sure everything's going to be moving uniformly, and it sure is. No matter if this was set to belt or world, if we were to, with the object, move it out the way, go back to scale, it should still scale just fine for us. Excellent, and we should be able to move it anywhere we like still. Great, so I'm just going to undo back to where this was at belt. Everything's at default. Now before we conclude this lesson, let's go ahead and tie up our clip so that we will go ahead and have that set up and move on to the next lesson where we'll set up the ability to be able to move the pivot of our control object. Okay, so with our control object for the flashlight selected, we go to modify, add another attribute. We can call this attribute switch into Boolean or float so we don't end up with green in our displayable attribute. Of course, that's just a preference again. Before the displayable, we can call this simply clip and hit add. And then as far as the attribute is concerned, we can make it a float if we'd like. Since we're going to be able to open and close it smoothly, we'll call it OP for open underscore CL for close. We can give it a min of 0, a max of 1, and a default of 0. So 0 is going to be closed, 1 is going to be open. Now that we've established that, we can go ahead and create this. Okay, now we're ready to assign our blend shape. So let's go ahead and go to our set driven key with our control object still selected. Then we go to our clip. We go to its blend shape. Select shapes. Load that as the driven. Select the loop. Select open and close. All right, remember, so 1 was going to be open and 0 closed. So right now what we can do, since 0 and 0 are set up and the object is closed, we can just hit key selected. Then we can go to our open and switch that to open. Okay, and again, you could also have used the connection editor. All right, so there's nothing wrong with going ahead and using that for this setup. Okay, so once we have that, we hit key selected. And of course, at this time, you'd probably want to switch this object to world. Okay, so that your flashlight isn't moving as such. So you can go ahead and switch that to world, and it'll move right back to where you need it to be. All right, but that's our open and close switch for the flashlight. We have it following the belt as well as the world. And that concludes this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll go ahead and set up the ability to be able to influence this object's pivot point.